Florida state is attempting to make child rape punishable by death. Do you think child rape warrants a death penalty? Why or why not? The problem with the death penalty isn't what crime is or isn't deserving of it. It's that you can get the wrong people. The government having this unilateral control to execute people is not good. This is a bad and loaded question. A lawyer once told me if rape and murder both have the death penalty, then rapists will be more likely to kill the victim to try and hide their tracks since the punishment is the same. Edit: why is my most upvoted comment about rape? Thomas More said it 500 years ago. It's a pretty old concept, but still one that people don't understand. I think putting thieves to death is not lawful, and it is plain and obvious that it is absurd and of ill consequence to the Commonwealth that a thief and a murderer should be equally punished, for if a robber sees that his danger is the same if he is convicted of theft as if he were guilty of murder, this will naturally incite him to kill the person whom otherwise he would only have robbed, since, if the punishment is the same, there is more security, and less danger of discovery, when he that can best make it is put out of the way, so that terrifying thieves too much provokes them to cruelty. I know someone whose uncle was accused of raping his daughter-in-law by the girl herself. She was 14 or so, and he went to prison for 2 years for it. She ended up admitting after 2 years she did it because he took away her phone and wasn't her real dad. They courts sided with her, everyone sided with her, and if the death penalty applied, he would have been deemed guilty and, depending on the weight, could have seen death for something he never did. It's not only a terrifying punishment in terms of what the criminal would do with more freedom under the same punishment, but also terrifying for the innocent falsely accused to be potentially put to death over a very poor lie from a child who doesn't understand what they're doing. That situation is more rare, I know, and I'm all about protecting the real child victims, but there's an extra depth to that is terrifying. Yeah, the imperfections of our justice system are why I don't support the death penalty regardless of the conviction. If we sentence someone to life in prison and later realize the justice system ducked up, you can release them. But there's no bringing someone back from lethal injection. I cannot and will not approve of government-sponsored and sanctioned murder. I do not believe in the death penalty for anyone. I also wouldn't be particularly upset if a child rapist died. Most importantly, in today's world, I do not trust the politicians of Florida to accurately determine who is and isn't a child rapist. Florida does not have a great track record. The state leads with the most exonerations from death row. This will pair nicely with DeSantis' new kangaroo court rules where you don't need a majority to convict for the death penalty. 812 now, and trying to make being a drag queen around children considered sexual assault. They're laying the groundwork for extermination of outgroups. The groundwork might already be there. The law isn't just for rape, but sexual battery. I could easily see a fascist worming transitioning into that definition, and it would only take 8 of them and a judge to start killing minorities they don't like. Same shit happened with gay people decades ago. If the majority of people are against a group with immutable traits, it's easy to just make vague laws and let the bigots in society do the dirty work. Thankfully the GOP started this while the majority of people are against them, so they won't be able to do as much damage. I don't believe in the death penalty, but if I did I can think of no better candidate. I don't believe in the death penalty. If you do, you have to accept one of two things. Either one. The state never makes mistakes, or two. The state occasionally kills innocent people. Edit. Okay, too many comments now, so I'm not gonna respond anymore. Just wanna make it clear I'm not saying that no one should be punished for anything, or that the state doesn't kill people all the time. My points above are specifically for whether I support the death penalty or not. Edit 2. Lots of bloodthirsty people in this thread. Edit 3. If you are pro-death penalty then watch this. Reasons I don't support the death penalty, approximately in order. I believe that the state's authority to kill should be limited to the largest practical extent. I do not trust judge and jury to apply the death penalty fairly and without prejudice. I hold an informed belief that the death penalty is not a significant deterrent. I do not trust the justice system to only apply the death penalty to the guilty. Life in prison can be revoked, death, once carried out, can't. I do not believe that punishment is a correct goal of the justice system. The goal should be prevention, with a secondary focus on rehabilitation when possible. Approved methods are largely unnecessarily cruel. Something like nitrogen asphyxiation would be less bad. The monetary cost of the death penalty is significant. I do not believe that the death penalty is necessarily worse than life in prison without parole. Edit 2. Lots of bloodthirsty people in this thread. Welcome to Reddit. The number of people who dream of, legally acceptable, killing is somewhere between concerning and alarming. Many that live deserve death. And some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. For even the very wise cannot see all ends. Gandalf. This is the quote I always think of when people talk about the death penalty. And if at first it seems ridiculous to be referencing the thoughts of a fictional wizard in a cave in a conversation about life and death, it's worth remembering the man who actually wrote those words, and that character did so after he returned home from World War I, invalided with trench fever from the Battle of the Somme, where two of his best friends were among the million who died. Tolkien wrote this having known more death than any of us could ever fear too. I don't find it hard to believe that, as he wrote that passage, Tolkien's thoughts must have turned to the friends he'd lost, and the countless others who deserved better than to be sent to deal out death to one another, and to be ground into the mud of a field so far from their homes. As someone who has survived XA, no. You immediately make it harder for victims to come forward, especially when you consider that most perpetrators of XA are close family members, followed by close family friends and people in positions of authority and leadership over the child. These are people that children have very strong feelings for. And those feelings are very easily manipulated to force a child into silence already. Imagine throwing being responsible for that adult's death if they say something onto the table as well. It would ruin a child. I lived through I love you and you love me. If you tell anyone, they won't let you see me anymore, and it will be your fault. Now ramp that up to if you tell anyone, they'll kill me and it will be your fault. I'd never have come forward. Edit typo edited more than once because emotions make for bad typing skills. Edit, it's time for me to spend a few hours away from Reddit, but for those sharing similar stories, your story won't go unseen. I'll be back tomorrow to read more and talk with you all. I see you, your feelings are valid, and I thank you for engaging in this really important discussion. Worth considering. If the goal is really to protect children, we should put their safety above our desire for vengeance when there is any conflict. It's so much more complicated in real life than our instinctive outrage wants it to be. We should put their safety above our desire for vengeance. This should go without saying. A lot should go without saying, but lately needs to be repeated. I don't trust the government enough to give them the ability to kill citizens. No. It's never a good idea to give the government permission to kill its citizens. Especially considering how many people have been falsely convicted of crimes. Since 1973, 185 people have been exonerated from death row. Just looked it up for fun, and around 1,500 people have been put to death since 1970. Which makes the proven false conviction rate 10% at a minimum. Going to take a wild guess and say the real number might not be so kind. I doubt many people would be okay with a 10% false positive rate on death penalty. Edit, this isn't accurate when one takes into account #convictions, see below. That's the wrong math, incidentally, because the false conviction rate would be out of how many people were convicted and sentenced, not how many were actually executed. There's currently another 2,500 or so on death row that have been sentenced, but neither executed nor exonerated. So since 1973, it appears there's been 8,800 death sentences. So the false conviction rate is just over 2% as a minimum. Still too much, and I'm not defending the death penalty here, just think math errors, propagated, serve as distractions for people who want the death penalty to not address the issues with what they're proposing. Fair points, and appreciate pointing out the thoughtless error. It would still be a fair statement to say that the 150 proven false convictions are equal to 10% of the executions though. I would also argue that even if only 2% of the convicted placed on death row were later exonerated, that it would likely be a huge underestimate. It's difficult to overcome a conviction, and doing so might be more comparable to actually getting a death sentence carried out in terms of effort and event, an endpoint. But that's not what I said and I was still wrong. Thanks. The goal of this law is to get the Supreme Court to allow the death penalty for more crimes that aren't homicides. How far down the criminal severity ladder are we comfortable going with the death penalty? Littering. Littering and smoking the reefer. For 100% clear-cut cases of child rape? Sure. Throw 'em to the ducking wolves. But how many cases are going to be like that? And given the direction Florida is going, how long before it becomes a broader child abusers get the death penalty? Then it becomes anyone who talks to a child about anything trans is a child abuser. This new law is a broadly acceptable first step in a larger and far darker quest.